It's time for Baby and Toddler Instructions with host Blythe Lipman. Blythe is a nationally renowned infant and toddler expert who has over 30 years' experience helping moms and dads regain their sanity, teaching them how to survive, and giving them the confidence they need to be the best parents ever. From sleeping to crying to potty training to choosing a preschool and so much more. If you're a parent, Baby and Toddler Instructions is the show you've been looking for. Now here's your host, Blythe Lipman.
Well, good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever in the world you might be. Thanks so much for tuning in to Baby and Toddler Instructions this morning. I am doing a live show. It is March 8th, 2017. It is National Women's Day. Yay for women! Anyway, I won't go on with that. This is a baby and toddler show for parents, and I did need to say that. Also, if you are listening to this show as a podcast, you can always go to toginet.com and find me. If you have a question or a comment, you can go to my website, mybestparentingadvice.com. I always have all the contact numbers of all my guests. And this morning, I have a great one who will be with us in just a bit. Dr. Stuart Shanker is the author of a book called Self-Reg, How to Help Your Child and You Break the Stress Cycle and Successfully Engage with Life. He wrote this book with Teresa Barker, and oh my gosh, we don't have stress, do we? If you're listening, go to Facebook, take a look at Blythe Lipman or my Best Parenting Advice or Baby Instructions. I just did a video, and you will see me talking and hear about the show a little more. So let's see. National Women's Day. Yesterday, this is interesting, I planted my herb garden every spring, and I know it's not quite spring, even though it's supposed to be 85 in Arizona this week. I plant an herb garden. Last year, I was so upset it bit the dust. I love to cook. I love to use fresh herbs. I have a small patio, so it's not like I have a farm. And I am very excited because I met somebody when I went to the gardening store who knew so much about growing herbs and how I was using the wrong soil and I wasn't feeding them right. But let me tell you, this is a great activity to do with your toddlers. Let them help you plant something in the spring and let them water it every couple of days and watch it grow. It's a great teaching moment. And actually, if you plant an herb, you can go the next step. You know, when you make eggs in the morning, let them sprinkle some chives in or whatever you're going to plant. It's a great activity to do with your little ones. But I'm excited about mine, too. Last year when I went to plant, I'll just tell you this story very quickly. I had everything planted, and my planter box fell. And yikes, there was a snake in the bottom of it. Forget it. I was so nervous. I didn't even want to plant anything again, and I was really freaking out. It was just a little garter snake, but nonetheless, I guess it was enjoying my little herbs, which is maybe why they bit the dust, and that's okay. Somebody enjoyed them. But anyway, gardening is a great thing to do with your little ones. What do we have? We have recalls today. Dillard's recalled baby jackets, the faux fur hooded bear coats. The metal snaps on the jackets can detach, and you can guess where they go, posing a choking hazard to little ones and children. Everything goes right in the mouth. So if you have this faux fur hooded bear coat, do not put it on your little one. You know what? Take it back to Dillard's. Call them. I have the numbers on my website, mybestparentingadvice.com, under recalls. Also, there was another recall. Kids too recalled the Opal Rattles. Those are those really cool clear plastic balls that have all the holes in it, and some of them have beads in the middle of it. Well, they recalled those because the beads can come out. And again, right in the mouth. They make balls, they make rattles. These were the rattles that were recalled with the balls in them. But they're great because the kids can put their hands in and hold them because there's a lot of holes in them, and it's great for fine motor skills. Anyway, that's the Kids 2 Opal Rattles. So that is also on my website already, mybestparentingadvice.com. And let's see, what else do we have today? Oh, my goodness, I can't wait to talk to Dr. Stuart Shanker about this. There were a couple of terrible daycare things. In Arizona, 3 people were arrested after a toddler was hit by a broom at the daycare. They arrested the owners. They arrested the employee. She hit a 21-month-old with a broom handle. He got a 4-inch cut on his face. And basically they sent a letter home saying that the child tripped at school over a toy and bumped his head on a table. And you know what? Terrible. All I can say is there's no excuse. There's no excuse. You know what? If you're losing your cool with the kids at home, in preschool, when you're out, tell somebody and take a leave of absence, even if you go for 5 minutes, and just sit down and breathe and take some calming breaths. There is no excuse for this. This is terrible, terrible. Also on the news last night, there was another incident. A Pennsylvania daycare worker pushed a 4-year-old down the stairs. It said there was a video. It showed the daycare worker shoving the child in the back at the top of the stairs. The little girl falls out of the frame, and then the woman looks at the camera. She was a 52-year-old woman. She was released from jail on a $25,000 bond. I mean, the 4-year-old only suffered a knee injury, thank goodness. And I don't understand this. She went back to daycare the next morning and was scared of the steps. I don't get this. I would be pulling my kid out in 2 seconds. They would never go back there. But anyway, child abuse in any way, shape, or form is just not okay. And I just can't believe that, you know, working in daycare, setting up preschool rooms, setting up infant and toddler rooms, I know kids scream, kids yell, maybe you didn't sleep last night. Maybe you have a bug and you're just not feeling great. Do not ever take it out on the kids. We're all human, and you know what? If we do lose our cool again, tell somebody and leave the room and say, I can't hack this today. That is okay. You're a human being. That's okay, but do not ever abuse a child. Oh, it makes me so angry. So I'm not going to talk about it anymore. You know, I'm glad this was caught, and hopefully, you know, some people will learn a lesson. And you know, they won't be embarrassed to say, I'm having a crappy day. I need to get out of here for a few minutes. So enough about that. I thought today I would share a couple tips from my book called Help, My Toddler Came Without Instructions, from the chapter called Toddler's Gone Wild. I thought it would be perfect because Dr. Stuart Shanker can talk to us about toddler behavior. So here's a couple tips from my chapter called Toddler's Gone Wild. First of all, when you're going to have a child, or, you know what, if your child's a toddler and you haven't talked about discipline or how to handle things with your mate, significant other, don't do it in front of your toddler. If one of you says you're in timeout, if the other one says no, you're not, do not do that. You know what? Try to talk about it ahead of time. And if one of you does something that the other one doesn't agree with, take it in the other room when it's appropriate and sit down and really talk about the things you're going to use when your toddler doesn't do what he or she is supposed to, or you think they're supposed to. You know, whether it's time out, whether you sit down and talk to them. Toddlers are wild, yes. Toddlers run around. Toddlers are adorable. Toddlers are just great, and they are going to do things that you never thought of. So if they're doing something that you don't want them to do, try to redirect them. That's the other thing. Their attention span is short enough. Get a book out and sit and read with them. If they're touching something that you don't want them to touch, don't give them a 10-minute, conversation about why it's not safe to touch something. Say, we don't touch that, and redirect them. When they're a little older, or if they are an older toddler, later on in the day, talk about, safety and what's okay to touch. Also, when you're going to give your toddler choices, just give them limited choices. Do you want to wear the red shirt? Do you want to wear the blue shirt? Don't say, do you want to wear the red shirt, the brown pants, the blue shirt? Too many choices don't work. And sometimes they change their mind. If you let your toddler pick out their clothes the night before, it's not okay to change their mind. Give them the choice at night and follow through. Follow through consistency is so important as a parent with all our children. I don't care what age they are. Consistency is my number one word that I tell any parent. So be consistent and follow through yourself, because, they watch everything you do. And if you're not consistent, then they're going to think it's okay. Also, one more tip. If you do choose to use timeout as a method, to have your child not do something, do not tell them to go into timeout by themselves. I know a lot of parents have tried this, and I've heard it's really hard not to laugh, but I've heard many stories that parents told me, I told my little one to go to timeout. So next time they did something wrong, they said, Mommy, I'm going to timeout. So it really isn't a teaching tool. Yes, it gets them away from the situation, but when they tell you they're going to time out, try your best not to laugh. I know it's so tough when your little one does something funny, so don't laugh. You know, you're trying to teach them, and they're obviously doing something you don't want them to do. So don't say, you know, put yourself in timeout. It just doesn't work. Be the parent. Be consistent. Have fun. Sit on the floor with them. Play with them if they don't do what you want them to do. Not a big discussion. Redirect, and be consistent. So we're going to have a break in just a few minutes, and when we come back, I am going to talk to my wonderful guest, Dr. Stuart Shanker. He's a distinguished research professor emeritus of philosophy and psychology at York University, CEO of the Merit Center. His most recent book, Self-Reg, How to Help Your Child and You Break the Stress Cycle and Successfully Engage with Life. He's gotten great reviews all around the world. The book was published in Canada, the U.S., the U.K., South Korea, Germany, the Netherlands, and with further translations and foreign editions in the works. He blogs all the time for Psychology Today, Huffington Post, and TMC websites. And over the past decade, he served as an advisor on early childhood development to the government organizations across Canada and the United States and countries around the world. And he became increasingly interested in the impact of excessive stress on child development and behavior. He's got a great 5-step self-reg model, the Shanker method, a powerful process for understanding and managing stress in children, youth, and adults. In 2012, he founded the Merit Center, and you can see that online. As a self-reg learning and information center, he commits considerable time to bringing the research and science of self-reg to parents, early childhood practitioners, and communities through presentations, master classes, online courses, webinars, publications, social media, and a blog entitled The Self-Reg View. Phew! I am honored that he's going to be on my show in just a few minutes after the break, because I don't know how you have time, but I'm so excited you're going to be with us. We'll be right back.
We'll be right back with more Help My Baby Came Without Instructions. It's Baby and Toddler Instructions with Blythe Lipman on TogiNet. We'll be right back right after these.
Secret Cuisines and Sacred Rituals is a quest, a place, and a feast. Join host Vilasi Venkatachalam every week to explore myths, mystique, old medicine, and brilliant modern solutions through a dazzling kaleidoscope of cuisines, cultures, and cures. This is the place where tribes gather, strangers and familiars, to be memory keepers and makers of our evolving, enduring, evergreen, spoken legacy of wisdom and ingenuity. In Velasi's words, when we do old things in new ways and new things in old ways, we paint with an inspired palette, weave our own healing traditions, and become our own guru. Vilasi is a troubadour of secret cuisines and sacred rituals. She collects stories of wisdom, ingenuity, and grit. She believes wellness and transformation happen when you stand at the threshold of delight and discovery. She displays her hidden penchant for drama when she leads the safari at the supper club. Her favorite pastime is to extol the marvels of cuisines, cultures, and cures. To her audience in workplaces, seminars, and salons, her mantra is, be your own guru. She is a biochemist, botanist, and alchemist who likes to churn delightful, useful things from a brew of art and science, ancient and evolving, old medicine, and new cures. Join Vilasi every Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, only here on the Woohoo Radio Network.
Reaching out from the heartland of the United States with quality programming, this is TogiNet Radio.
It's words you never heard. Recently, while my family was skiing in Colorado, we were greeted by a red fox that darted out of the trees. This beautiful animal with his big bushy tail just stood in the snow and stared right at us. Maybe he smelled all the liverwort we had in our pockets. Liverwort is another word for junk and snack food. Typically, a red fox eats scrub and woodland, but this one appeared to have had his share of hamburgers and hot dogs from the chalet grill. Foxes are similar to dogs, except they are not pack animals. The female fox or vixen typically gives birth to a litter of 2 to 12 pups. When they are young, they all live together as a family, known as a leash of foxes. Once grown, the young foxes leave the burrow and go out to live on their own. I'm Carolyn Davidson, and you can have fun challenging your words you never heard vocabulary with my free app, Too Funny for Words.
Welcome back to Baby and Toddler Instructions with Blythe Lipman on TogiNet, the hour for all moms with little ones to come for great advice, encouragement, and great ideas for all new parents. Now, back to the show with Blythe Lipman.
Well, welcome back to Baby and Toddler Instructions. I am here with my wonderful guest, Dr. Stuart Shanker. And before I welcome him, if you have a question, a comment, want to just say good morning, call me 877-864-4869. We love callers. So welcome Dr. Stuart Shanker, who wrote this great book with Teresa Barker, Self-Reg, How to Help Your Child and You Break the Stress Cycle and Successfully Engage with Life. This is such a great book. I was telling Dr. Stewart during the break that I was looking at his book for the third time right before I went to bed, and I didn't have any bookmarks, so there's pieces of clean tissue all over the place of things I want to ask him and have him talk about. It's such a great book. So welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm delighted to be here.
You know, on page 8, it says, self-control is about inhibiting impulses. Self-regulation is about identifying the causes and reducing the intensity of impulses and, when necessary, having the energy to resist. That's a big sentence, and that's a lot to think about. Can you simplify that for my listeners?
Yep. I had a big job for the government up here around 15 years ago, and we were tracking the number of kids that were having problems with heightened impulsivity. So that could be things like shouting or, having an emotional meltdown or not being able to, get off the computer, all those kinds of things. And what we were seeing was this extraordinary explosion in the number of parents and teachers that were complaining about kids with these issues. So we started to look at it pretty carefully. And what we found was, the traditional way of thinking is that somehow you've got to teach the kid how to inhibit, how to resist those impulses. But what we found was that, A, doesn't work very well for the kid. It's very hard on parents. But the real key was to figure out why was the kid having these impulses, and could we stop them before they even got started? And that's really what Self-Reg is all about. It's about understanding when your child is getting those heightened impulses, why that's the case, and what you can do to, really either reduce the intensity of the kid's impulses or get rid of them completely.
Well, you know what? That says it all. So let me ask you a question. When you have a little one, let's say a toddler, my grandson's going to be 2, and of course sometimes it's terrible twos, and he throws himself on the floor and screams and whatever it is. How, as a parent that has a young child, how do they diffuse that? We all know time out, redirect, we know a lot of things, but how do we realize why they're doing it? Is there a way when they're that young?
Yeah, there sure is. In fact, it's a great question, Blythe, because that's exactly the time we want to start doing Self-Reg. The younger we do it, the better, because it means that by the time the child gets into, say, preschool or school, they'll be way, way better at knowing when they're about to lose control and be able to handle it. So what do we do when the kid does have that meltdown? Well, we can't show your listeners now, but we use a little picture of the brain to explain all this. And there's really 2 parts of the brain that are going on here. We like to light it up. There's a blue brain, And that blue brain is when the kid's nice and calm, and the kid can listen to what we're saying. The kid can think about, even a little child can think about what they're doing and what they shouldn't do. But there's also this brain that we call the limbic brain. It's a red brain. It's deep inside the brain. And when a kid has a meltdown, let's say, that child has gone into red brain. And unfortunately, it shuts down that blue brain. It shuts down that part of the brain that could listen to us, process what we're saying, learn from what we're saying. He can't do any of those things. So what we have to do is we've got to turn off that red brain. There's a little alarm that's in it, like a car alarm. We got to turn off that alarm. And how do we do it? Well, we can't do it by explaining. We can't do it by yelling or shouting. None of that works. In fact, it makes it worse. But there are techniques, and we show them in the book, there are techniques to turn off the alarm even when the child can't process, let's say, what we're saying. So how do you do it? Well, one of the best ways you can do it, the first thing you do is you lower your voice, soften your voice. You know, when we teach this, we use a video that listeners can watch online with Michael Jr. It's an extraordinary video to see. His baby has just been born, and he goes into the delivery room. The baby's lying on the table, and she's screaming. And what he does is he says to her in a very low, soft voice, "Don't worry, sweetheart. Daddy's here. Daddy will protect you." And the baby in front of your eyes instantly stops crying. Now, why did this happen? Well, what happened? Because to turn off your child's alarm, that's what sent them into red brain, that child has to feel safe. That child has to know that you are there and you will protect them. So what we have found is if we lower and soften our voice, if we stroke the child gently, if we reduce things that might be stressing the child, like bright lights or a noisy crowd or even a smell, what happens is the alarm turns off. The child recognizes that you're there to keep them safe, to keep them secure. And guess what? That blue brain comes back online as soon as you turn off the alarm. Then you can start to talk to your child again.
You know, and it's so fascinating and so true, and I just love it because one of my favorite tips that I give to my toddler parents is when your child's having a meltdown, it's exactly what you say. I tell them to actually get down to their level and whisper.
Perfect.
When you whisper to a toddler, it's like their whole body goes, whoa, and it's basically what you're saying. It's their blue brain. It's their blue brain coming back on, right?
Blythe, the first thing we tell our parents when this is happening is get down on the floor with your kid. Get down on their level. Now lower your voice. So you and I have both learned the same thing through years of working.
So basically, you're turning their blue brain back on when you whisper.
Yeah.
To go the next step. And you know what? And I never realized this because everybody should have this book. Every parent should have this book because the diagrams in here are so interesting. And I'll tell you what I really love. I love the real life stories because, you know, we can all relate to a child that's done the same thing ours has done. And somebody goes, yeah, well, I tried this and it works. Yeah,
that's the point, right? So the point is, oh, no, not another science book. What we want, it's not what I want. I mean, I've got two kids, too. They're teenagers now, so you can be sympathetic with what I'm going through. And look, you know, so I have a 15-year-old son who's a hockey player who seems to be trying to find out how many times can he behave just like that 2-year-old toddler. And the techniques I use with my 15-year-old are actually a little different from what I would do when he was 2 years old.
So you don't whisper. Can I ask what you do with an older child?
Seriously? What I do is I know that when we have these outbursts, there's something going on. I also know that it's incredibly hard for a 15-year-old boy to tell you. So what I do is, you know, my immediate instinct is I want to yell back. But we've learned don't do that. And so sometimes I do have to, you know, do something to calm myself down before I approach him. But really what I'll do is I do lower my voice very gently. don't ask him too much, and just I actually, with my own son, what I do is I'll stroke his arm. Now, here's an interesting tip for parents with little guys too. When they go into red brain, they find it very difficult to answer questions. Our language systems are actually in the blue brain. They're in the left side of the blue brain. But we need to get those lines of communication going. That's the only way that the child's going to recognize that I am there to make them safe and secure. So what we learned over the years is that there's a very primitive form of communication, a nonverbal communication. That doesn't shut off. That's actually in the same part of the brain as the red brain. So what we do with kids is when they're in that state, you can't ask them what's wrong. You can't say, tell me, why are you doing this? But what you can do is let's take the example I just gave, stroke them, because it calms the nervous system very quickly. But I need to get permission from my child before I can do it. But how can I do that if my kid can't actually talk? Well, what we do is we say to the child, raise your finger if you'd like me to stroke your arm or your back. Or even better, you put your finger inside the child's fist, and which usually they're clenching, and you say, squeeze my finger if you'd like me to whatever. And they can always do that because that communication system is still functional. It's still online. Now, then something magical happens because, first of all, touching you reestablishes that parent-baby or parent-young-child connection. Secondly, the greatest way to reduce a child's meltdown is to get them to communicate. Even if it's just communicating with a hand squeeze, yes, you can stroke my arm. And I can't remember what chapter it is, but I tell the story of that 11-year-old who mom was having a devil of a time because she kept on trying to argue, to reason. And what we got mom to do was exactly what I'm describing. And this was a kid where the arguments would go on for hours every night.
You know what? I have to interrupt you for a second because the music's coming and my red brain is going to start getting upset if I don't let you go to commercial.
Anyway. Yeah, we covered it well, though.
So we'll be right back. Stay with us. I'm with Dr. Stuart Shanker.
We'll be right back with more help. For help, my baby came without instructions. It's Baby and Toddler Instructions with Blythe Lipman on TogiNet. We'll be right back right after these.
Which U.S. state would you guess has the fastest talkers? Recent research by analytics company Marchex revealed that the nation's fastest talkers come from Oregon, Minnesota, Massachusetts, Kansas, and Iowa. What about New York, you ask? New York ranked near the bottom at 38. But New Yorkers do use more words. A New Yorker will use 62% more words than someone from Iowa who have the same basic conversation. What's another word for fast-talking? Tachylaya. America's slow-spoken or tardiloquent talkers were from North Carolina, Alabama, South Carolina, Louisiana, and Mississippi. What's a word for someone who likes to say the same thing over and over? A batologist.
It's words you never heard.
I'm Carolyn Davidson, and you can have fun challenging your words you never heard vocabulary with my free app, Too Funny for Words.
It's the Fitness Minute with fitness expert Annette Hammond.
Having the right gear when you exercise is valuable and can really make a difference to your workout. When your feet hurt, your whole body hurts. Having the correct shoes with the right support is critical, but the socks that you choose can also make a big difference to how your feet feel. There are many excellent choices when it comes to workout socks. Choose socks that absorb moisture and perspiration. Feet can get really hot when you exercise, so choose socks that breathe and help your feet stay cool and dry. Having soft cushioning makes a substantial difference and can add comfort to your feet. Your socks should also protect your feet from friction and prevent blisters. Investing in good athletic socks that fit well is highly worth it and can add positive results to your workout. I'm Annette Hammond. To hear other fitness and weight loss tips, visit our website at AnnetteHammond.com.
Welcome back to Baby and Toddler Instructions with Blythe Lipman on TogiNet, the hour for all moms with little ones to come for great advice, encouragement, and great ideas for all new parents. Now, back to the show with Blythe Lipman.
Well, welcome back to Baby and Toddler Instructions. I am here talking to my wonderful guest, Dr. Stuart Shanker, the author of Self-Reg. We are talking about tantrums and stress, and the power of touch is powerful. Yep. You know, it's interesting. I'll share a really quick story. In my preschool, I had a almost 2-year-old that used to cry every morning when her mom left her. And what she used to do is she used to tell her to open her hand, and she would give her a kiss in each hand and say, these kisses are for mommy to hold, and when you're sad, you have these kisses. And it's just something quick, and Jordan didn't cry, and she knew she had a piece of mommy with her all the time. And, you know, no matter how you touch your older child, your younger child, and while you were talking about it, I was thinking, like, you can't say to a 15-year-old, what's wrong? They'll go, nothing.
Right.
Or they'll go in their room and slam the door. Boy, do I remember those years.
That's right. But the irony is that they've gone red brain, right? And if you can be that soothing presence, what they remember is how when they were 2 years old going to preschool, you kissed their little hand and said something. That memory is actually lodged deep inside their brain, and it's incredible how quickly that will calm them down if you can just reestablish that connection with them.
It's so interesting because it takes 2 seconds. Also, it calms us down too, doesn't it?
Huge. And one of the big things that we do an awful lot of work in parts of Canada where there's been severe trauma. And trauma gets passed down from one generation to the next. We can actually see that, I'll give you one example. We now know that the trauma that the Jews experienced during the Holocaust is still showing up in third and even fourth generation. And we see this.
Really?
Yeah, it is. And we can explain why. I won't do it in this show, but we can actually explain what's going on in terms of the brain. But the point is that if parents everywhere are under so much stress today. And, no matter where you are in the political spectrum, you guys are going through an awful lot of stress these days. And the problem is that when parents are overstressed, not only is it difficult to deal with your child's stress when they're having a meltdown, one of the things that shuts down when you go red brain is your ability to see that your child's in distress. You miss those cues. So when we work with parents that are themselves really overstressed, and they have a child that's overstressed, the first thing we do is self-reg for the parent, for their own well-being. Because that parent has to be calm in order to have that blue brain available so that they can calm their kid.
And we're the biggest example, like I was saying at the beginning of the show. They watch every single thing we do, and if they see our stress, they feel it. From day one, babies feel it. When I've always said in my in my baby rooms, a cranky baby usually has a stressed mom or dad. Because the babies pick up on it.
Okay, so Blythe, you're going to have to come work for us.
Okay, send me the ticket. I'll be there for the interview.
You do realize that it's still below freezing up here. You still want to make that offer? But
I'll be there in August when it's 110 here.
But it's a hugely important point. And one of the things that we see over and over is parents can try to memorize what they should say. But if they're tense, the tension is called leaking. It leaks through their voice. So one of the reasons why it's such a powerful thing to lower your voice, soften your voice, is that low, soft voice sends a message to the child, I am not stressed. I am not anxious. But you can't fake it. You can't tell yourself, pretend that you're this way. You actually have to be calm. So I've never met the parent who could prevent leakage in like their tone of voice or in their eyes or in their gestures. And you're absolutely right. The kid who is in red brain, that's all they see. That's all they hear.
You know, and it's sad. I don't know if you heard the beginning of the show. I was talking about these two daycare workers. One hit a kid with the broom. The other one pushed the kid down the steps. And I was thinking about these two daycare workers, you know, that were obviously must have been in red brain. And when you're in a job, especially with children, you know, how do you self-reg and how do you make yourself aware? You know, you should be in every school for the teacher meetings because the teachers get so stressed too with these little ones.
So we are, our organization that you mentioned, the Merit Center, we set it up to work specifically to work with schools. So we work with preschools, primary schools, and secondary schools across Canada. And when we set it up, our intention was really to, you know, explain all the stuff about, you know, stress behavior in children. But we are working with so many teachers now that over and over, the first thing they tell us is, I need this for myself. And the reality is, you really can't be, not only can you not be effective in this job, it's a very hard job, but you won't enjoy it either. And so our starting point now, whenever we go into any school or school district, is we begin with Self-Reg for You, and they all love it because no one's ever really addressed how hard your job is. It's a tough job, but it's a wonderful job. I can't think of a more enriching way to live your life, but not if you're overstressed.
No, and you know, especially because I deal with preschools, we have a lot of younger women working at the preschools, and some of them may not have children yet, and they don't realize what an impact. You know, preschool sees the kids, unfortunately, more hours than the parents do because everybody has to work. And they play such a big part. You know, I have to ask you about this because I want you to talk a little bit about the marshmallow experiment. I heard about this years ago, and I would love for you to share your opinion and tell my listeners actually what the marshmallow experiment is to begin with.
This will make you laugh, but I gave a big talk yesterday for all the lawyers of Ontario, and we spent an hour on the marshmallow task. So essentially what it is you take a young child, typically between the ages of 4 and 6, and you put them in a room by themselves where there's nothing to distract them. And then you put a marshmallow in front of their eyes. And you say to the child, you can have this now, but I'm going to leave the room, and if you wait till I come back, you can have 2 marshmallows. And then you wait and you see, does the kid gobble up the marshmallow before you get back, or is the child able to wait? And then lots and lots of predictions by this. But what we found, we studied this real carefully, and what we found was the marshmallow task is actually a stress test. There's a great book by a Canadian astronaut called Chris Hadfield, and it's all about how you become an astronaut. And he says that the culmination is you go into an isolation chamber, and some of the greatest physical specimens fail because they can't take the stress of being isolated. But that's actually what you're doing with the child. What you're really testing here is how well a child can deal with stress. And there are, you know, for some kids, let's take as an example a child, let's say, who has ADHD. One of the things we know about ADHD is that their sense of time is very different than, say, a typical child. So for that child, waiting for 5 minutes feels like waiting for 5 hours. This is a huge stress for them. And, you know, once you begin to understand that things like this are really indicators of how much stress my child is already under, and stress is a very subtle thing. It can be things that you never imagine are a stress. So how much stress is my kid under, or how stressful does the kid find this test? Then what we can do is we can start to do self-reg so that the child becomes aware of what the stresses and what stresses them and what to do about it. And you can start to do this at around the age of 3. Before that, you have to do it for the baby or the infant. But once they reach the age of 3, they can actually start to learn how to regulate themselves.
That's pretty interesting. So should I ask you, would you have eaten the marshmallow?
I did this test on my children when they were young, and so my son had eaten it before I'd even left the room. And my daughter just sat there, and she would have sat there for days if I'd let her. And so I came up to her. I let her go for about 10 minutes, and then I came up to her and said, "Sweetheart, why didn't you eat it?" She said, "Dad, I don't like marshmallows."
Oh, that's great. So you should have put chocolate or something else
right.
there.
I said, that's exactly what I said. We're going to do this test again.
So since you go into schools, I don't want to get into this too much because we're going to go for another break in just a few minutes. But when we come back, I'm going to ask you your favorite parenting tip. And I want to talk a little bit about in the schools, if you have a difficult child and they're in a preschool, how do you I'm just going to say it like this, if it makes sense. How do you get the teacher to self-reg when you know your child's difficult and you're nervous? It's such a catch-22 because I'll have parents come to me and say, you know what, the teacher doesn't like my child or the teacher doesn't know what to do with my child. And sometimes I'll think, I'll say, well, you need to calm down and, tell me the 5 things that are wrong and, let's deal with this. But it's tough sometimes because personalities don't mesh, and I know a lot of preschool teachers can't stop. When I had my 2-year-old room many, many years ago, I had 15 2-year-olds and 3 girls. The rest were boys.
Yep.
And let me tell you, it was a very noisy room. Yeah. And circle time was not something that anybody was really going to sit still with. And, this was so many years ago. I wish I knew self-reg because I can remember walking out of the room thinking, okay, do I bring candy in? Do we have snack 10 times? What do we do to get these kids to sit still? And they weren't supposed to sit still. You know what? They were 2-year-old boys and they weren't supposed to. So when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about preschool because so many parents, put their children in preschool and they don't exactly know how to deal with the morning, with the evening when they're so tired and stress. That's the name of it. Stress. We got to get rid of it. We got to get some marshmallows out and eat them and not look at them. Anyway.
Okay, I'll do that. Great.
When we come back, we will talk more to Dr. Stuart Shanker, author of How to Help Your Child and You Break the Stress Cycle and Successfully Engage with Life. We will be right back.
We'll be right back with more Help My Baby Came Without Instructions. It's Baby and Toddler Instructions with Blythe Lipman on TogiNet. We'll be right back right after these.
It's words you never heard.
A new study finds the happiest couples sleep the closest together, as in less than an inch apart. A survey of 1,000 couples found that 86% of those who kept such close perimeters reported they were satisfied with their relationship. Only 66% of couples who slept 30 inches apart or more reported being completely happy in their marriage. What's the word for getting up on the wrong side of the bed? Metutalipia. Another predictor of relationship happiness is touch. While 94% of couples who made physical contact throughout the night reported a happy relationship, just 68% of couples who kept their distance did the same. What's the word for the semi-conscious state between sleep and wakefulness? Hypnopompic.
It's words you never heard.
I'm Carolyn Davidson, and you can have fun challenging your words you never heard vocabulary with my free app, Too Funny for Words.
It's the Fitness Minute with fitness expert Annette Hammond.
What do nuts, fish, spinach, dairy, and bananas have in common? For one thing, they contain high amounts of potassium and can cut your risk for a stroke by as much as 21%. A stroke is a disruption in your brain's blood supply that happens when there's blockage in a blood vessel or a blood vessel bursts. Potassium is an electrolyte and is involved in muscle and nerve control and blood pressure regulation. It's needed for maintaining the body's fluid balance. Studies have suggested that diets high in potassium help maintain a healthy blood pressure and possibly protect against stroke and heart disease. But remember, regular daily exercise is your most excellent defense against stroke. For the Fitness Minute, I'm Annette Hammond. To hear other fitness and weight loss tips, visit our website at AnnetteHammond.com.
Welcome back to Baby and Toddler Instructions with Blythe Lipman on TogiNet, the hour for all moms with little ones to come for great advice, encouragement, and great ideas for all new parents. Now, back to the show with Blythe Lipman.
Well, welcome back to Baby and Toddler Instructions. I am here with my guest, Dr. Stuart Shanker, and we were talking about stress and children. But before we go any further, since this is the last part of the show, and it goes so quick, you'll have to come back again.
Okay, gotta go.
Tell my listeners where they should get the book, and every parent should have this book. It is great, easy to read. You know, I didn't know about red brain, blue brain. You know, I learned from all my guests as well. So where can my listeners get your book, find you online?
So the book is, obviously it's sold on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, all that, but it's about to come out in paperback. And I think the paperback launches next month. I'm not sure, but that'll make it easier for parents.
Well, and it's an easy read. As Dr. Stewart said, it's not another science book. It's not at all. The examples in the book of, real kids like we have and how they've self-regulated and the stress cycle has been broken. It's just, you'll identify with the whole book. It's wonderful. You won't want to put it down. So let me ask you, before we talk about the preschool, do you have a favorite parenting tip?
Yeah, my very, very favorite tip is restore before. And what that means is we want to read the signs of when my child is starting to get agitated, and I want to restore that kid before the explosions happen. The fact is that once they've had the explosion, it takes an awful long time to get them back to calm. But if we can learn how to read the signs and do it before that point is reached, they recover very quickly. So it's easier for the child, and believe me, it is way easier for the parent or the teacher.
Well, that's a great tip I'm writing down because I think there should be another book, Favorite Parenting Tips. It's true. How do you know, though, like with your toddler? Toddlers have meltdowns in 3 seconds over nothing.
But they don't, and that's the interesting thing. So we thought that, right? And
yeah.
So we began to study it, and it turns out that there's all kinds of signs way before that quick meltdown. You just didn't see them. So what's happening is the kid is getting there's this little graph that we use in the book. The kid's going into the top right red zone where they're really burning through way too much energy and becoming very tense. And the signs are interesting. So if you're a clinician, you look at something like their pupils. But how can because pupils get more and more dilated as the kid's getting closer to the point. But how can parents do it? Well, here's a real good tip for you. Okay, scientists, what we study is one of the things we study the pitch of a child's vocalizations, and when they're getting to that sort of danger point, it's called the intolerable peak. What happens is their voice changes. The tone of their voice becomes a little more shrill, a little higher, or they start to speak a little faster, or they start to speak almost compulsively. But every child is different, so you have to learn what my kids or my students' signs are. But it's like tells in poker. There are always these signals, and once you start looking for them, it's quite extraordinary. As a matter of fact, this is what we were doing yesterday. They were telling me, oh, my God, yeah, now that I think of it, I actually intuitively knew, I could sense that this was going to happen. Now what we can do is, before it does happen, we restore before. One of the questions you asked me is, how can we apply this, say, in a preschool environment? So can I address that?
Oh, please.
Well, we're very concerned up here because these problems are becoming more common. We're seeing now little guys that really aren't, having these sort of explosive behaviors or emotional meltdowns. It's becoming much more common. and a generation of early educators that really have not been taught how to deal with this. And so what happens is the teacher gets overstressed, and there's a real risk that you're going to do the worst possible things to this kid, like restrain the child. That's a terrible thing to do. But by the same token, we also know that if I've got, let's say, one kid who has that meltdown, I've probably got 6 more that get easily tripped by seeing Johnny have his meltdown. So what are we supposed to do? Well, we've gone into environments now that are beyond chaotic, and it doesn't happen right away, but within a couple of weeks or a couple of months, that environment is transformed. How do you do it in a classroom environment? Well, what you do is you do what we talk in the book, you do a classroom makeover. There are ways to create calming environments. You introduce things that the child can do that calm them down. So, for example, with my daughter, I use a scoosh ball, something she can squeeze, or plasticine. Play-Doh is one of the gifts to an early educator, because you don't say to the child, you've got to go calm yourself down in the corner. Instead, you bring over the Play-Doh and get them engaged in making a Play-Doh picture. And before you know it, the child is calming down. And ideally what happens is, as you work on Self-Reg with these children, they start to feel the signs of when they're losing it, and they'll go and ask or to do the Play-Doh or whatever it is. There are lots and lots of strategies you can use. The goal here is not just prevention. The goal here is, the emphasis in all this is on self-regulation. So we want the child to learn how to do those 5 steps you and I have talked about, so that when they get older and they have stresses come out of nowhere, like has happened to the U.S. today, they have the skill set so that they can manage adaptively, effectively, with stresses that you and I really can't predict at the moment.
You know, this is so true and interesting, because I'm thinking about this preschool room again and how the pitch used to get higher.
Yeah.
When I knew something was going to happen, and then when 2 little boys started to fight over whatever it was, and the rest of them...
Blythe, it's interesting, isn't it?
It sure is. And then you have 15 kids screaming, and then what do you do?
Now think about those young teachers you were talking to me about at the break who've never been taught this, right?
No.
No, we want them to learn it, not just so that they're better teachers, but so that they remain calm, so that they don't get, it's called a limbic response. They can go into red brain very quickly when a child's in red brain. But if they see stress behaviors for what they are, it's quite extraordinary how that alone helps them stay in blue brain.
And it's so interesting. All I can think of, mindfulness is also coming to my mind. If you're mindful about where you are, even when you talk to people on the phone, as adults, you can hear their pitch go up when they start to get upset with you, because I've actually said on the phone, stop being upset with me, because I hear their pitch go up.
Yes.
And you try not to say other bad things.
In one of my blog series, it was a 3-part series, but Self-Reg really is itself a mindfulness. It's a mindfulness method. That's literally what it is.
Boy, and if you know this from the beginning, because, when you think about it, and you talk about this in your book, here's this baby that, has this lovely trip that's tight and warm, and all of a sudden they come out and there's noise and crying and bright lights, and talk about stress for everybody.
Yeah, and unfortunately we have a culture that sees these babies, the babies that's overstressed, they see that baby as a difficult baby. But of course there isn't such a thing. What there is there's an overstressed baby. And maybe the stress for that baby is sounds or smells. I tell the story in the book about that one kid where the mom was using an air freshener that they loved, but it was a stress for their baby. So, if the baby is having, if they're colicky, whatever it is, these are signs, or having trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, or they're crying a lot. These are stress behaviors. And now we have to become stress detectives and figure out what are the stresses. And we have to calm ourselves down and know that, these are always these are always problems that we can get a fix on and that we can help our baby become calm and not develop these sort of maladaptive habits that can take place very, very young. So we want parents to see no such a thing as a difficult baby, really or infant or toddler, but there are kids that don't have the resources yet to manage their own stress response, and so we have to regulate them so that they can learn how to regulate themselves.
Exactly. What a perfect ending to the show, because we are at the end, and I have to say goodbye to you. Everybody should buy Dr. Shanker's book, Self-Reg, How to Help Your Child and You Break the Stress Cycle and Successfully Engage with Life. I will put all his information on my website, mybestparentingadvice.com, and I would love to have you come back again because there's so much more to talk about.
Okay, call in.
All right. Thank you so much. You have a great day.
You too, Blythe. This was fun.
All right. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow, what an eye-opening show. You know, I feel calmer already. Just hearing about Dr. Stuart Shanker's tips, I mean, just amazing. We all have to be mindful and calm ourselves down. And you know what? Self-reg, that's the name of the game. Self-regulation for ourselves. So next week, my guest will be pediatric dentist Dr. Catherine Sledge to talk about everything teeth with your little ones and how it's so important, even before that first tooth appears, to take care of their dental health. If you want to be a guest on the show, you can contact me through my website, mybestparentingadvice.com, or go to toginet.com. There will find me, listen to all their other great shows. And please like my pages on Facebook, Baby Instructions, My Best Parenting Advice. I do live Facebooks. I do Periscope. I'm on Twitter. I'm all over. I love helping everybody, my wonderful listeners, expectant parents, grandparents. But we're at the end, so as always, I like to end my show with a little humor. After all, if you can't laugh at least once a day, your life is too serious. Parenting is a constant battle between going to bed to catch up on some sleep or staying awake and finally get some alone time. My kids call it yelling. I call it motivational speaking for the selective listener. And finally, because I'm such an awesome parent, I'm currently helping my kids search for their chocolate that I ate last night. Uh-oh. Dun, 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 dun. Hey, I think we've all done that. Anyway, I'm so happy you could tune in today. Don't forget to take a little time each day to get on the floor, play with your kids. If you have an older child, sit down and talk to them. And the power of touch, a hug, a stroke, holding your finger. So important. So thanks for tuning in today. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.